Hey, greetings, guys. Thank you for joining us for another video installment. My name is Genghis Shakhan, and I'm an attorney at Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. Shakhan and Wilkerson Law is a boutique law firm. Just to tell you a little bit about us, we're a boutique law firm. We're two attorneys, as well as our legal team. We are small on purpose. It gives us an opportunity to get to really know our clients, to know their cases, and we find that that is the best way to advocate in small batches where you really get to know your clients and you understand their legal goals and you can help advance their legal interest. Well, today we have a great video for you. Today we are going to be discussing another domestic relations issue. Today we are talking about child support, but not just child support, the child support obligation. We're going to talk about things that can make that number rise or that can make it fall if you're interested in an upward modification if you're a custodial parent, or a downward modification if you're a non-custodial parent, or vice versa. This is going to be a great video for you to tune into. Before we get started, as always, let me go ahead and give that disclaimer. This is for educational purposes only. By watching this video, it does not establish an attorney-client relationship between you and the law firm of Shakhan and Wilkerson, nor between you and myself. Again, this is for educational purposes only. If you are interested in a consultation, if you are searching for an attorney, just be mindful, we cannot provide legal advice to non-clients, but if you are in the market for an attorney, feel free to schedule a consultation with us. You can do that by calling 404-999-9529 or 478-845-1213, and we will be happy to talk with you in a consultation. We generally do same-day consultations. So if you give us a call, you will get on the horn with one of our lawyers. It is not an intake specialist that will do your consultation. It is an actual attorney. So I don't know if that's a little different than some of you may have experienced in your search, but we take a lot of pride in our work and take a lot of pride in specifically selecting cases. Okay. And so what that requires is us being very hands-on. That being said, we'll talk a little bit about why Georgia, the child support might be higher or lower than you expect, okay? And that's going to be based on some of the things that we discussed today, some of those conditions, okay? So for both parents, that is the custodial, the non-custodial parent, you're looking at the way that is, of course, child support is calculated in the state of Georgia, is they take the combined adjusted gross income of both parents and they assign a pro rata share. Those folks that follow us and watch us consistently, you already know that because we've discussed that in other videos. And I recommend taking a look at some of our previous videos on child support. If you take a look in the library, you'll find some child support videos that should be pretty helpful for you. Strongly encourage you to tune into some of those other videos as well. All right, so the one thing that you do want to be mindful of is because we get calls and folks will say, hey, my buddy has this child support obligation and I'm looking to be in that same ballpark. Or, a girlfriend might have, a certain child support obligation and you're looking essentially to have those types of numbers. Every case is going to be different, and I'm going to tell you why here shortly, okay? So do stay tuned with us. So Georgia's child support is not just based on income alone. And so if you have a buddy, your guys are making about the same money, his paramour or ex-spouse or, whoever it is, his ex-girlfriend is making about the same money, and your expectation is going to be that you're going to have about the same, you're going to be in the same neighborhood in terms of a child support obligation number. That might not be the case. And I'll tell you here in a few moments why that is. So Georgia child support is not based on income alone. And so you need to get that through your skull, guys, is Georgia child support is not based on income alone. So there are ways to change that child support obligation for it to be modified up or down from its presumptive amount, right? And so let me give you a few ways. One is going to be something like daycare. There's work-related child care because of things like daycare that expense can carry over. Who's carrying health insurance, or maybe one parent is already under a court-ordered child support obligation. Dental, vision, That type of stuff might bring those numbers up. Tax credits, special needs. If your child is special needs, if they have a traumatic brain injury, or they have some other special needs, medical needs, that could drive it up, along with any kind of just extraordinary cost. And maybe your child was already in parochial school before you guys went through divorce, and one of the parties, the custodial parent or the non-custodial parent, is going to have to pick up that expense, or you're going to have to divide it, and it's going to be divided pro rata, right? And so we'll talk a little bit about those adjustments, but those adjustments, as you can see, can change your numbers, and they can fluctuate between parties just based on those terms, right? And those conditions, okay? And so we'll talk more about that here shortly. So let's just talk really quickly about the basic calculation of child support. Essentially, it starts with the income of both parents. That is where child support begins, right? That's not where it ends. So be mindful of that, all right? And so the court determines, again, your child support obligation based on your initial obligation, based on the income of both of those parents. And then they'll assign, as I mentioned, a percentage, right? We talk about that pro rata share, a percentage to each parent based on those incomes, okay? So if you are, one parent may be making disproportionately more than another, let's just say, so the child support numbers suggest that you pay 60% of the child care expenses you are on the hook for, while the other parent is on the hook for 40%, okay? Let's just say that you are the custodial parent. You're the parent that has the kids the majority of the time. Obviously, you're not going to pay child support to yourself. You are instead going to collect that 40% from the non-custodial parent, okay? And so that is the way, essentially, usually the child support obligation is initially calculated, okay? Those aren't the final numbers. And so that's something that you also need to be mindful of, is that is a starting point, okay? And so sometimes folks are, they're, hey, stop right there. But that's a starting point. We know that kids are expensive, okay? All right, so from there, let's talk a little bit about some of those work-related child care costs, because they can increase your child support obligation. All right, and so it's one of the actual biggest adjustments out there that are usually overlooked. So work-related child care or daycare, or some other kind of child care after school care that you might be on the hook for, any kind of special transportation. So for work, for one parent to essentially go to work, a minor child, maybe they're toddlers, they have to be watched. Maybe they have to be picked up from school, and there's an expense associated with that, or some kind of special vocational training that can influence those numbers. Okay. And so Georgia requires essentially that those qualifying work-related child care expenses to be averaged monthly. And then from there, it is going to be considered an additional expense. Okay. And it's going to be allocated between the parents. And so again, when each parent has their pro rata share, their percentage, that is the percentage of that work-related child care cost that you are on the hook for, okay? Let me give you an easy example. So let's just say that, and we know for a fact, you're not going to find, probably, at least in the state of Georgia, a $1,000 a month child care bill, all right? But let's just say hypothetically that your expense is $1,000 a month for child care. One party, the custodial parent, is responsible for 60% of that, and the non-custodial parent is responsible for 40%. That means that the custodial parent is responsible for $600 for that cost specifically, and the non-custodial parent is responsible for $400. Okay, and so how that will be factored in is maybe that will be part of the actual child support obligation, or I've seen it where folks are paying to the child care provider directly, okay? But it's still considered part of the child support obligation, okay? So that is one example, right? That you want to be mindful of that when it comes to especially really young children, that expense is probably going to be incorporated into your child support obligation. Another and a big one is going to be health care, health insurance, okay? And that can change the numbers, all right? And so, same deal in terms of the percentages. Same thing, again, and this is specific because, or I should say unique because many times you have to be very careful calculating these numbers either for yourself or for the other party because a lot of times there is like let's just say, for example, one parent is covering health insurance for himself as well, him or herself, as well as for the child. You may have to get in there and take a look at that pay stub and actually do the numbers and crunch them to find out how much that the cost is for that one child, and not obviously for the entire family as well as the adult. Okay. And that sounds a little bit complicated, but your attorney probably knows what I'm talking about. And we have to do that often. We have to get in there, take a look at that pay stub, and we have to say, okay, Dad, you're paying $500 a month for health insurance for yourself, for your new wife, and for this minor child, right? However, obviously, that $500 isn't just to cover the minor child, all right? So there has to be some subtraction there and some division to find out what that actual number is, and that number might serve as a deviation to drive down this child support obligation for if dad is the non-custodial parent. Okay, so hopefully that example makes sense. But the flip side is in play as well. If mom is covering that healthcare cost, then that can drive up. If mom is the custodial parent, that can drive up the child support obligation based on her picking up that cost, the 100% of that cost. Okay, and so that's something to think about as well, because those numbers, that can change essentially an obligation hundreds of dollars. It might impact an obligation hundreds of dollars, and over the course years, that can basically add up to thousands of dollars. And so it's something that you do want to pay special attention to. Dental and vision are the same, okay? Same deal. And you have to get in there again, look at those pay stubs and crunch those numbers. This is one of the reasons why many folks will bring on an attorney, is because, a lot of the times you want to make sure that you're getting all the deviations, all the adjustments that you can get to make sure that, those child support obligation numbers are in fact accurate, right? Because many times it's expensive to retain counsel, and logistically getting into court and trying to adjust or modify the child support obligation, it's a hassle, right? And so you want it to be done correctly the first time. And that's one of the reasons why folks will bring on a family law attorney to get this stuff addressed for them. All right, so dental and vision. The other part of this is, and usually you'll see this in a parenting plan, is those uninsured medical expenses. They matter as well, okay? And so a lot of times you'll talk about reimbursement for those things. And so some of those uninsured costs can include things like copays, deductibles, orthodontics is a big one, dental treatment, physical therapy, vision care, asthma treatment, counseling is a big one. Sometimes folks will go before the judge and argue about, mental health therapists, any kind of, psychiatrist, any kind of meds that are associated with psychologist or psychiatrist treatment. I should say psychiatrist because they provide the meds. And then, any kind of acute chronic medical condition, okay? Those can be uninsured, right? And so the parties can be on the hook for essentially picking up those costs. And usually if one party picks them up, there might be something written into the parenting plan where they are going to be reimbursed. A lot of times that happens within 30 days. A lot of times that happens with the party that essentially facilitated the visit, providing proof in the form of a receipt to the other parent. And usually that's the non-custodial parent, okay? And so another big deal and another way that the cost of the child support obligation can rise or fall. And I say rise or fall because, again, it depends on who is covering if it's a medical event, who is taking care of it, or who has been designated as being on the hook for it in a parenting plan. Okay. And so now parenting time is another one with the change in Georgia law that can now directly affect obligations. So for those non-custodial parents that are not exercising parenting time, this can impact what those numbers look like for you. Those numbers can go up, right? If the custodial parent goes back into the court and say, "Hey, the non-custodial parent's not exercising their actual parenting time. I'd like an adjustment, an upward adjustment." They may be justified in receiving one. Okay. Or if you are a non-custodial parent and you exercise a lot of parenting time, right? So you're not just what they call a weekend warrior. You're very involved in your child's life. You see them every week. You're doing pickups and drop-offs, etc. You might be in the market for a downward modification of child support, right? So parenting time is a big one. And so talk with if you're doing this yourself, of course, you can do the research. If you have counsel, you do need to obviously talk with counsel. This is something that might absolutely impact those child support numbers, okay? And get you a good adjustment, right? Either upward or downward. It depends. All right. All right. So let's talk a little bit about court order parenting time. If well, I want to get into. I'll get into that shortly. I'm gonna save that for the latter part of this presentation. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about how court order parenting time. Make sure you remind me. Court order parenting time might help adjust again those numbers upward or downward. All right. Now, another big one that sometimes parents overlook, not just sometimes, many times, is that child care or that dependent care tax credit. Okay, the child and dependent care tax credit. That is something sometimes that we like to get addressed. We like to put that into the parenting plan. That can impact your numbers, right? Especially if one parent is entitled to that tax credit. That might also call for some type of a deviation, right? Because it can offset the economic cost of qualifying child care, okay? And so that's something to also think about. And then special needs, right? So we have parents who do have children that have special needs. I talked earlier about traumatic brain injury. They might call for specialized education, private schooling where appropriate, or therapy, tutoring, or some kind of specialized equipment, transportation. They may have unique transportation needs, medical treatment, or any kind of necessary services, right? And that might include personnel that comes with those services. That might be an extraordinary educational cost that absolutely needs to be factored into child support, right? So sometimes folks will have autistic children that they may have some type of a specialized person that assists, or they might require some type of special transportation to and from some type of vocational training school. Those things can be factored in. If there's costs associated with them, they can absolutely be factored into the overall child support obligation. So those financial obligations don't fall squarely on the shoulders of one parent, as they should not. Okay. But here it's just important that documentation is going to be essential, and this is going to be at the outset. If you have counsel, you need to discuss this stuff with counsel as they are calculating or attempting to calculate what that child support obligation might look like, or you're bringing those things with you to court to provide as exhibits to the judge. Invoices, things like treatment plans, school records, IEP information, insurance statements, and all evidence of some type of recurring cost associated with everything that we've just mentioned. Now, another thing that can adjust, and you're seeing the recurring theme here. All I'm discussing is things that are going to adjust or inflate those numbers. All right. So again, back to my initial point is, coming up that the income of both parents is only a starting point. That is the baseline. All right. There are many, many other factors that can influence those numbers and make those numbers go up or go down. Extracurricular activities, right? Or some kind of special child rearing expenses. So things like summer camps, athletics, band, club, music lessons, art lessons, travel. So we have a number of parents who their children are involved in travel leagues, whether that's baseball or they may swim or golf or what have you. And there are expenses, clubs that come with that, and those are they may be considered extracurricular activities. But with those expenses, of course, again, the court usually depends on if they are contemplated and they make sense, right, for the parties, right? So if there are, I will say, income disparities between the parties, right, and your child is involved in a very, very expensive hobby or extracurricular activity, the court is not always going to assign the cost pro rata, as if it makes more sense that one parent pick up those costs. Let me give you an example. Let's talk about private school, okay? And so if one parent who is doing very well financially elects to put their child in a private school that may cost $10,000 a month, and there's another parent that's not doing well financially, it stands to reason that the court is not going to assign the cost perhaps to the parent who does not have the financial means to underwrite the cost of their child's education, right? In a private school. And we've argued this in court, right? So one parent is doing very well financially and they want their child to go to a really, really expensive parochial school or private school. And another wants their child to go to public school because they just do not have the means. Okay. And so it's something that sometimes has to be litigated, something that has to be addressed through the courts. However, that's just one example. And the same is true for clubs. The same is true for extracurricular activities in the summer. Camps is another one that we see. So some of these camps and clubs are very expensive. Okay. And so it just really depends on the situation. However, those expenses and costs can be part of your child support obligation, or if not part of the obligation, you might be responsible for offsetting the cost, again, based on what percentages were allotted to you when it comes to your general child support obligation. Okay. Travel for parenting time. Many times we have parents that one parent might live in Atlanta, the other Valdosta. One parent might live in Augusta, the other in Macon, okay? Or one parent might live on the other side of the country. And for the parents to exercise visitation, the child might have to jump on a plane. The child might have to get on a bus. The parent and the child might have to jump on a plane, right? And travel. Courts will sometimes allow for travel expenses, okay? And that's something, again, that has to be litigated usually. That's something that, or it might be, something that is negotiated between the parties. But that could also impact child support numbers, just depending upon how often the parties are actually exercising visitation. If it's happening once a month, then it makes sense that, maybe those child support numbers might look a little different, okay? If one parent is traveling and has to get on the plane, the child has to get on the plane, or a parent has to travel, 3 hours one way to pick up the child and, 3 hours back. You're talking about gas, or, maybe your parents are meeting in the middle. So all of those things are addressed in the parenting plan. But now I'm talking specifically now about the cost that might be associated with exercising that visitation, but also the logistics can also be addressed in the parenting plan as well. All right. Now I talked, I think, briefly about one parent might have an existing child support obligation, right? And so sometimes, occasionally, and the men that we represent, they may have a child, another child that they are paying child support to a different parent. However, if you are not under a child support obligation, the court will not give you credit for that support that you're paying to that other household. Okay, so this is specifically for non-custodial parents or custodial parents, non-custodial parents who are on the hook for a child support obligation outside of their the current household, right? Because that might warrant a reduction. So a pre-existing child support order is essentially what the court is looking for in these types of situations, or qualified other children. Okay. All right. So I won't get into really the high income parents. That's fairly unusual. It's not something that we need to address here. Maybe we'll address it in another video. But you don't want to forget who is paying the expense. All right. That's going to be critical because usually it's asked in the worksheets. All right. It's asking about how much daycare might cost, who's on the hook for it, who's paying for it. Okay. And so the documentation can change results. And I want you to really leave this video with that understanding. You want to go into court, especially if you're pro se. You don't just want to say to a judge, hey, child care costs sure are expensive. You want to go in there and you want to bring your proof. Okay. So you want to bring your daycare contracts, your invoices, receipts, your healthcare insurance breakdowns, dental and visual premiums, tax returns, pay stubs, medical bills, extracurricular expenses, parenting calendars, and any kind of existing court orders. And that is going to help the court essentially adjust the child support numbers as they should be adjusted, given some of those pre-existing situations. Okay. And so I want you to always bear that in mind going to court with your evidence. A lot of times, some of the biggest mistakes that essentially pro se clients or pro se non-clients make is they will go to court. They will make these arguments. However, they will not have evidence that is going to essentially help their cause. Okay. So for a final takeaway, I want you to bear this in mind when you're calculating child support. Remember, the conversation doesn't just stop at income. Okay. So the final numbers can be impacted by everything that we just reviewed: parenting time, daycare, health insurance, dental, vision, any kind of tax credits, uninsured medical expenses, special needs, extraordinary educational expenses, travel, other children, and other important deviations. All right, guys, hopefully this video has been helpful, especially if you're going through a divorce or, maybe some kind of modification, a custody modification, as well as a child support modification, or maybe you're going through a legitimation and, you guys are in the stage where you are calculating what child support needs to look like. This is something for you to consider. As always, if you need an attorney, you're looking to hire an attorney to assist you in this process, you're always welcome to schedule time with us and chat and see if we are a good fit for you, and vice versa. 478-845-1213, 404-999-9529. You can give us a call. We'd be more than happy to assist you and help you out. All right, guys, as always, if this video has been helpful, please give us a like. If you know anyone that's going through any type of legitimation or divorce, make sure you forward this video along to them. Make sure you follow us, guys, and you hit the notification button so that you can see when we're posting. As always, we'll see you next time. Have a great day.